Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Shalom. Welcome to another episode of the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Where am I at the moment? I'm in Johannesburg at Jihad, which is a building here in Joburg which houses various Israeli orientated and Zionist orientated organizations. This is a second home for me, if anything else. And what am I doing here? You might be wondering. Well, right behind me, I'm just going to move to the side so you can see what I'm talking about. Right behind me, there is a gathering of various organizations, Christian church groups, Zionist groups, Jewish organizations, basically a broad spectrum of South Africans who are here to support Israel. And why? Because Israel has been under attack. You guys know this. I did a previous vlog on this particular issue, that Israel is under attack by terrorist organizations in that part of the world. And what we've seen from the mainstream media is this weird apology tour by them, basically trying to justify the actions of the likes of Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Fatah, etc. And it's absolutely unacceptable. Worse yet, on the mainstream media, the only voices you've really heard from have been the voices that are in favor of the terrorism in that part of the world. The voices that are such as BDS and various groupings, mostly the political elites, who are very much in support of those terrorist groupings and really in the name of free Palestine. And we're saying enough of that. If anything, there are other voices in this country which are very much pro-Israel. And I will argue that the vast majority of South Africans, the 97% Christian community in this country, and really the large Jewish community and ordinary South Africans are very much pro-Israel. So with that being said, I'm going to get you some voices of ordinary folks who've come here to show their support for Israel. And I want to talk to some influential voices too. Guys, for example, who head up the South African Zionist Fed and organizations like that. So with that being said, welcome to it. We're going to have that conversation. As I say that, the smirk is coming from the fact that I've just heard that the BDS types are currently convoying and making their way to here. Surprise, surprise. I'll bring you those visuals too now that I'm at it. Guys, remember quickly, if you want to support the BDL show, please, all of that information is in the descriptor of this video. This is the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Your favorite fat boy, your favorite Zionist, your favorite classical liberal. Welcome to it. Let's get that conversation going. Guys, welcome to it. I did say I would be in conversation with the ambassador. This is the ambassador, of course, of Israel here in South Africa. Sir, I'm going to get straight into it because, you know, there's a big buzz at the moment and I don't want to keep you from fellow Zionists, but talk to me about the situation in Israel at the moment. Hamas, the Palestinian Jihad, Islamic Jihad, Fatah have literally been launching rockets into Israel. And if you are listening to the mainstream media here, you would think Israel is the aggressor in all of this. But talk to me about the difficulties of actually communicating the reality in Israel right now.
Yes, thank you very much. As you said, in the last 11 days, Hamas was launching, Hamas and other terrorist organizations, Hamas itself is a terrorist organization, acknowledged, by the way, by most of the countries of the world as a terrorist organization, and it's very important to know that. So that terrorist organization was launching more than 4,000 rockets on the citizens of Israel, indiscriminately trying to kill as many as possible. I don't think any country in the world will accept such a reality, that a terrorist organization is shooting on its capital, Jerusalem, on the people, indiscriminately trying to kill as many children, women, elderly, hit schools, hospitals, airport. No country will allow it. So Israel had to fight for defending its civilians from terrorists, and we did it with the most utmost cautious of not targeting any civilians, while the other side is shooting rockets from neighborhoods, hiding and using its own kids and population as human shield. But Israel was trying to have as last innocent people to casualties. Fortunately, after 11 days, this war or operation was finished. We have now a ceasefire between the parties. And I do hope that the citizens of Israel will be able to come back to their regular life, because it's not normal for 4,000 times to look for shelters against rockets.
So maybe as the final question, there is a conversation to be had about the misinformation, and often the loudest voices in the room are the pro-Hamas, pro-Islamic Jihad types who hide behind being pro-Palestine. And I made a point on one of my vlogs that if you are supposedly pro-Palestine as a lobby group, you then have to be the loudest voice in condemning Hamas, in condemning the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and the like, but we don't see that. If anything, we've even seen public reps in America, such as this Ilhan Omar, I might be butchering her name, but an AOC, openly endorsing the actions of the likes of, endorsing tacitly, the behavior of Hamas, but hiding behind being pro-Palestine. Talk to me about this weird contradiction that we're seeing, where the likes of BDS, who are about to drive past there, by the way, to try and intimidate, but talk to me about that weird dichotomy where, people who think they're pro-Palestine will say nothing to condemn the terrorist actions of Hamas, Islamic Jihad and Fatah.
Well, the Middle East is a complicated area. People that are supporting Hamas, they don't even understand that they are weakening the Palestinian Authority itself. There's a reason that Hamas was orchestrating everything from the missiles over Jerusalem to this 11 days of tension in the Middle East, was exactly that, to extend its dominance against the Palestinian Authority itself. If you support it, first of all, it's not moral to support any terrorist organization shooting missiles and hiding behind their own kids as human shield. People forgot to condemn terrorist attacks against Israel, forgot to condemn that they are using their own people as human shield, forgot to condemn that 500 of their rockets fell back on Gaza, killing their own people because they were misfiring there. People think that everyone doesn't understand a thing about the Middle East, and they can change the fact as whatever they want. But you can see people know the fact. If they choose to ignore it, as I said in my speech, if you don't tell the whole truth in court, it's like you didn't tell the truth itself.
Well, there you have it. The pro-BDS, pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian Islamic Jihad types have arrived. Let me be fair, they are chanting Free Palestine, but I've already heard some slurs, anti-Semitic slurs come from that side predictably, as I've always argued. I've always said this. They are trying to be the loudest voice in the room, but it simply won't work because you have a whole bunch of people behind there who are very much pro-Israel and will voice themselves. So I'll bring you visuals. Hopefully they'll stay calm because there's lots of security here, including police. But yeah, you'll get to see for yourself who exactly they are. the BDS types are here, doing what they do best, which is to support Hamas and Islamic Jihad. Fascinates me that people who claim to be for Palestine will say nothing in condemnation of the terrorist grouping from that part of the world. And again, you know, the Constitution of South Africa guarantees the right of every citizen to protest peacefully. Nothing wrong with that, I'm not opposed to that. But it's always funny to me that these BDS types are always keen, including this type over here. Don't know what his problem is, but he's been super aggro. And no, none of them wanted to speak on camera. They just prefer to shout these slogans. And I must reiterate this, none of them wanted to speak on camera. They just prefer to shout slogans. We did try. Kudos to the police. There is actually quite a decent police contingent of JMPD. This is the security here at the Zionist Fed and Jihad, the building. And the police are also here on scene. I'm hearing they want to go to the other side. Again, this is all very predictable, you know? The moment to call out Hamas, the moment to call out Islamic Jihad, these so-called Free Palestine types come out, but none of them want to condemn the terrorism. Guys, welcome to the Big Daddy Liberty Show. Who am I talking to?
Bafana Modise, South African Friends of Israel.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Pamela. I'm a friend of South African Friend of Israel.
Perfect. Guys, I'm going to get straight into it. You can probably hear in the background already the BDS types are here to try and basically, they'll claim they're protesting, but really to intimidate because, yeah. First things first, Israel, why is it important to you? What is your connection to it?
For me as a Christian, I mean, that's where the prophets walked. This is where Joseph, David, Jacob himself as the father of Israel. And by this comrades calling out Jews as occupiers, as settlers in that land, they are denying the biblical truth, they are denying the Jews to exist in their land. And Israel has a right to exist as a biblical prophecy fulfilled in our lifetime, but also that as a Jewish ancient homeland. Hence we are saying we are Zionists.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a strong connection, I suppose, in that regard. I mean, this is a particularly pro-Israel event. There's many people here. There's Christian groupings. There's some Lemba brothers who I'm seeing over here. Pam, what brought you here? Why is Israel important to you?
Israel is the custodian of Christian heritage. We all saw what happened when the Palestinians took over Joseph's tomb. Joseph was a patriarch of the Jewish people, son of Jacob. He asked to be buried in Jerusalem when the Israelites left Egypt, and they desecrated that tomb and turned it into a mosque. So that just shows you what will happen if Israel ceases to exist and if the Palestinians are able to take over. So as a Christian, I have to stand not only for Israel, which is an amazing country, it's a light to the nations, it has revolutionized agriculture and the usage of water, it's a startup nation, it's a moral army, but also it's a custodian of the Christian heritage.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of points you made there which are critically important. You know, but for the sake of time, let me move to my second question because, you know, as I said, I rocked up here, there was dancing, there was celebration, really celebrating life, celebrating Israel as a custodian of not only Jewish sites in that part of the world, but also Christian and even Muslim sites are protected by the Israeli government. But I want to move us to a particular point, you know, that contrast of joy, dancing, celebrating in here, and out there, angry, teeth gnashing. There was even some anti-Semitic slurs I heard being thrown out there. And we've seen this around the world when these BDS type organizations come here claiming to support Palestine. But Bafana, we've had this conversation before because you've been on the show before.
Sure.
There's a big difference between saying you're pro-Palestine but also being pro-Hamas. How does those two things match up?
I'll tell you one thing, my brother. It's hatred. It started from a long time ago. From 1948, Israel was deemed to never exist in this lifetime. They believed that they would crush down Israel in 67. So today, our leaders have sold our history of apartheid, and now the same history of South African history is being used to play politics in the Middle East. This is an Arab-Israeli war. Call it what it is, and maybe we'll find a solution. But we should never hide behind human rights because you are scared, you are hiding your own hatred and antisemitism against the Jewish community. Israel will exist, Israel will live. They are using Palestinians as war proxies for their own ends. If they care about Palestinians, they will do much for them. There has been money that have been floated into the Arab war, into the UNRWA, into the Palestinian Authority. Why are they not doing anything for the Palestinians? They are blaming Israel for the problems that they have created themselves for their own people.
Absolutely. I must just maybe add to this, and I'll come to you just now, Pam, but, you know, I did a vlog last week where I asked that pertinent question. How can you claim to be pro-Palestine but say nothing about the very people who are killing Palestinian lives, namely Abu Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Fatah, and the illegitimate Palestinian Authority? Israel is a democracy. They've just come back from another round of elections, and maybe even another round of elections about to happen. But since when last did the Palestinians, or quote, the people in Gaza had elections? These are questions that no one talks about.
You know, one thing I'll tell you, my brothers, that Hamas has been seen as if it's a revolutionary movement. Meanwhile, a terrorist organization. Our history in South Africa, them Iswe, and all other leaders, they stood up fighting for justice. There were no black people in parliament. There were no black people in hospitals teaching others. There was no coexistence in South Africa back in the day. In Israel, you have that. The West Bank issue, the Gaza issue, is an issue of hatred, is an issue of anger against the Jewish community. Israel will live, Israel will stand, but Hamas needs to be condemned. Because if you don't condemn Hamas, you might as well say Jews have a right to die.
Well, that's exactly what they're saying. I mean, they're never bold enough to openly say it. But, I mean, that's exactly the point they're making. Final question, guys, because I want to challenge this notion that's being thrown around. And you'll hear it being thrown around quite a lot. And as a South African, it offends me, to be honest, this notion that they appropriate apartheid and call Israel an apartheid state. I don't know if you've been to Israel, Pam. Not yet. I'm saying not yet. I'm wishing good wishes for you in that regard. I hope you'll make it there. But I'll begin with you, Bafana, and then I'll come to you, Pam. Sorry. You go to Israel. I've been there. And it is the most inclusive and diverse society ever. If you look at just simple things, even signs that maybe direct you, like this way there's Arabic, English, and Hebrew. But talk to me about your experience. I know you've been to Israel, but talk to me about your experience. Is there apartheid there? Are the racial groupings separated? Are the Arabs and the Israeli Arabs, excuse me?
Okay, I'll start here. In the IDF itself, there are Arabs who are in that IDF. In the hospitals, there are doctors who are Arabs. In schools and clinics, they're not separate clinics or hospitals. They share the same buildings. I was in a restaurant dancing along Arabs and Jews. Go to the beaches. You see Muslim women there and Arab women and Jewish women in that land. There is no apartheid in Israel. That is the truth. Our history needs to be reclaimed back. Claim back our history of South African apartheid history in South Africa, because there's nothing, there's no connection to the Arab-Israeli war. Call it what it is.
Absolutely. Maybe to end off with you, Pam, maybe as someone who wants to go to Israel, anybody who's watching the show, all right, my apologies, guys, there's a lot of hubbub behind us, and we'll bring you those images. But Pam, final question, final point to you, final word to you, goodness me. Talk to me about your wishes, what you would like to see in that part of the world. On this show, we're big proponents of the two-state solution, but for there to be a two-state solution, the likes of the Palestinians have to recognize the existence of Israel. But talk to me about what you would want to see in that part of the world.
Well, I'd like to see Islam become the religion of peace that it claims to be. I'd like it to take the moral high ground and to admit that Israel isn't perfect, but neither are they. That Israel has a right to exist, that the very heritage that they claim on the Temple Mount is actually based on Israel's heritage. That without Israel, without Abraham, they wouldn't be there. So, let's be real about the Abraham Accords. Let there be real peace, and let the people who are actually oppressing the Palestinians, Hamas and the Fatah, be called out by the Arab countries. To have solidarity and hatred of Israel based on an idea of this is what it means to be a Muslim is very disturbing. And I think if you are a religion of peace, then preach peace, be real, and stop seeing Israel as an enemy when Israel only wants peace and wants to work for the betterment of the region.
Absolutely, Bafana. Israel, what do we want to see What should be the future of that region?
My brother, peace is possible. We saw by Dubai, UAE came on board. Many Arab countries came on board and said we can put aside our differences and actually unite on a peaceful value. No, peace is important. It's salam, it's shalom, it's khotso, as it's all Africa. So it's important that we prioritize peace over everything. But demonizing Israel and claiming to be a victim, whereby you are trying to kill and annihilate the whole nation, they will never suffice. Jews will never, ever, ever again allow themselves to be extinguished like they happened in the Nazis, like the way it happened in Poland. Israel has a right to exist and they will defend themselves. So now the only thing that we can go forward to is peace. And Christians, let's continue praying for the peace of Jerusalem. As CJ Mokhwen said, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, the biblical obligation, and we are not ashamed of standing with Israel.
Absolutely, and indeed, I fully agree with that, guys. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Again, you heard it from ordinary people who came to pledge and show their support from Israel here. I'm going to keep the conversation going. Hopefully, we'll chat to someone from the SAZF, that's the South African Zionist Fed, and yeah, you're watching the BDL show. Rowan, thank you so much for joining us. South African Zionist Federation, you guys have part of the organizers of this particular event. Why was it important?
It's important that as Jews we stand up for who we are, that we stand up for Israel, we stand up for Zionism, which is intrinsically connected to our Judaism and to who we are as Jews.
Absolutely.
And it's very important that we show solidarity for Israel that has been under attack for 2 weeks with indiscriminate rocket attacks coming from Gaza, targeting innocent civilians. And Israel only wants peace. And we're here to stand for peace. We're here to ask for coexistence with other South Africans. After this is over, we as South Africans have to work together. We can't be having divisiveness inside our own country. And we don't want people to spread hate and intimidation. And that's why we're here.
That last point you just made now, the notion that you're here for peace, I mean, visuals that I've had of this event, of joy, people celebrating their love of Israel. But right outside as we speak, Rowan, and I'm sure the viewers can actually hear it probably feeding through the mic now, the angriest lot I've seen, I mean, I've already flighted images of exactly their arriving here. BDS types claiming to support Palestine, but say nothing in condemnation of Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Fatah, these terrorist organizations. How do they square that circle?
Well, we would hope that they actually are pro-Palestinian, but it seems like they are more anti-Israel. That's certainly what the case is, to come and spread hate, as opposed to encourage the Palestinians to come to the negotiation table. Israel has offered its hand for peace for decades. Israel has accepted the principle of peace literally since 1937, 1947, 1967, 2000, 2001, 2008. Every single opportunity, Israel has extended its hand out for peace. And we ask local South Africans to encourage Palestinians to come to the negotiation table. That is the only solution. There's absolutely no point in perpetuating this conflict. Israel in the last year has made peace with Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Morocco and Sudan right here in Africa. Peace is not impossible. It is achievable. It can happen.
Final question, maybe on that particular point, because I think it's absolutely critical. You know, I have a running joke on the show that, you know, if you stand in front of a mirror and say "Free Palestine" 3 times, Yasser Arafat appears and says no. But, you know, with that being said, I make fun of it, but really some of the stuff I've been hearing outside there is really vile, some really anti-Semitic slurs, and we've seen this around the world, in places like New York, Europe at the moment. Whenever there is a BDS type of protest, we hear anti-Semitic slurs and the like. Some of those boards, for example, saying Zion-Nazi that we saw written outside by the BDS types. Talk to me about the rising anti-Semitism and how we in South Africa should nip it in the bud, even if it tries to rear its head.
Well, as we've seen, whenever there's an attack on Israel, suddenly anti-Semitism around the world increases. And yet these people are telling us that there's no correlation between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. Why then do they come to the heart of the Jewish neighborhoods to try and target us if they're not anti-Semitic? Why are they shouting these slogans? Why are we seeing these terrible slogans and placards outside? This is pure hate, pure anti-Semitism. If these people are wanting peace, make peace, come speak to us. We work with everyone. We speak with incredible people in Israel and the Palestinian side, people who actually want peace. And that's the message we should be promoting. Not anti-Semitism, that needs to be fought. Not racism, not hate. We're here for peace. And as you can see, by contrast, we're just celebrating Israel here. We're showing our love for Israel. We're not spewing hate. In fact, we're asking the Palestinians to come meet Israel. We're not asking for violence. We're asking for peace. That is the message we need to spread, and I think it's very obvious if you're in here, you're feeling the message of love and peace, and that's the message we need to be spreading.
Rowan, thank you so much for your time. Super appreciate it. Again, you heard it from Rowan Pullivan, of course, who's from the South African Zionist Federation. After this short break, we wrap up the show and I give you my thoughts on the events here today. All right, thanks for watching this episode of the BDL show. Let me leave you with this final thought. There's a lot of conflicting and contradictory signs that you saw amongst these BDS and so-called pro-Palestine types. The one assertion they make, as you can see on screen, is that them being pro-Palestine isn't anti-Semitism. But here's the problem. They're standing they're in a group where there are signs that are calling Jews Zio-Nazis, for example, and they're waving flags of actual terrorist organizations that have openly said that their whole existence, the basis of their whole existence is the genocide of Jews, the hunting down of Jews, the destruction of the Jewish state of Israel, the only Jewish state surrounded by Arab countries, for example. So that it begs the question, as I asked in vlog 97, and I will ask this question again: are you willing to condemn the violent and bloodthirsty types of these terrorist organizations? And as I say this, I mean, you're watching the images as I talk now of people who, some of them are ignorant of these flags. They don't know what they're waving because they believe the rhetoric of BDS, which pretends to be for Palestinians. But none of them are willing to condemn the violence, the terrorism, the targeting of civilians by terrorist organizations. I mean, in this crowd, they're waving flags of Hamas, the green flag that you're watching with the white inscription, and the flag of a country like Iran, which is a state sponsor of terrorism in that part of the world, destabilizing that region. They're waving that white flag, which you can see, which is of the Al-Qasim Brigade, a terrorist organization, the military wing of Hamas. And of course, the black flag that you're watching is that of the Islamic Jihad, another terrorist organizations that have openly stated that their goal is the killing of Jews. In fact, the yellow flag that you're seeing is of a terrorist organization that operates out of Lebanon called Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah, let me put it this way. I and many other attendees at this pro-Israel event are Jews. Indeed, we were in a Jewish neighborhood. Jihad is situated in a Jewish neighborhood. The head of that organization that you're seeing the yellow flag of, the head of that organization, a Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah of Hezbollah, has said that he hopes that we will gather in Israel, that's we Jews will gather in Israel, so that he doesn't have to hunt us down globally. So the flag of that organization was being flown by people who will then hold up signs saying that their supposed pro-Palestine lobbying is not anti-Semitic. How do you square that circle? And this is why I ask the question of those who were at that BDS supposed pro-Palestine event. Will you condemn the terrorist likes of Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qasim, Islamic Jihad, and of course countries like Iran? That's the question I'll leave you with. And I hope that you'll stand with us on the Zionist side of the fence, who are looking for peace, who are looking to stand with Israel, and who are looking for eternal peace in that part of the world via a two-state solution. That's what we want. Will you stand with us? Thanks for watching, guys. Super appreciate it. It's been another episode of the BDL show. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Let me wrap up by reminding you that you can support the Big Daddy Liberty show. All of that information is in the descriptor of this video. And whilst you're at it, please hit that like button and, of course, share this link. Show people what we are talking about as Zionists when we say that, we would want the world to emulate the values of Israel. It is, as the Jewish notion of tikkun olam, to be a light unto the nations. So, hope you enjoyed watching this. A reminder, please, that you can support the show, as I always say. And as I wrap up, remember, never trust a commie, let alone a terrorist.
Israel.